Hello, I hope that you're doing well wherever you are in the world. It's actually evening time. Evening time. Get it? Because I'm called Eve. It's evening here in Spain, which is actually quite nice. It's a more pleasant temperature to be in the evening here. But I'm doing it in the evening so that I can accommodate our guest this evening for map chats. I'm very excited. I've been really enjoying doing these map chats. Learning about the different cartographers has been super rewarding, and seeing the faces behind some of the amazing maps out there. So I'm just going to invite Josh in now. This kind of disclaimer at the beginning of everyone. I hope that the internet works. I have got my iPad if it doesn't work. Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Hello. Very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing good.
I'm just hoping that I say that I give this disclaimer at the beginning of every live, that I just hope that the internet holds.
Yeah.
So yes, good evening. Would you like to introduce yourself to the good people of Instagram?
Sure. My name is Josh Stolars, and you can find me on Instagram at MapEffects. And I do fantasy cartography and different types of illustration work. And I've been doing maps off and on for over a decade now, but really only seriously in the last 2 years. I actually just passed my 2-year anniversary on Instagram a couple days ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You have a party. I hope that you had a party. Even if it was just on your own, you were just like...
I kind of did that. Does that...
That's really great. And I just want to say, like, I'm a massive fan of your work, and you've been so supportive to me, and I know that you've been super supportive to other people. So I want to say, first off, just thanks for being 10 out of 10 map friend, because that's really cool. I think that a community such as this needs people like you, kind of like yaying people on.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's encouraging.
So I kind of got like a few questions that I prepared. Also, I've had a few people ask me to ask questions to you. I've actually made some notes this time because I'm feeling very organized. This is going to be the first and only time that's ever going to happen.
Well, that happened for me then. That's awesome.
Yeah, for you, Josh, of course. So the first question was from Dimension Door. And it's, which real world places inspire you the most?
I'm inspired by the real world wherever I am. It really just kind of depends on the moment and the mood, because I mean, if you just look around, there's beauty in all types of creation and stuff, whether it's plains, deserts. It doesn't necessarily have to be these grand vistas and stuff. There's simple everywhere, which I know is kind of a cop-out answer, but
no, but I agree that it's often with fantasy landscapes, this is kind of like sensationalized view of how landscapes look, and it kind of like, a lot of people are striving for realism in their work even though it's a fantasy landscape, and so having all these fantastical landscapes and landmarks isn't necessarily going to help you achieve that. And also, if you constantly have your landscapes filled with these crazy things, then it kind of detracts from their beauty and uniqueness in a way, I think.
Yeah, I kind of always feel like when that happens, that you can tell that the story maybe started first, and then they were creating a map around the story because everything's too conveniently placed. It's like, oh, we have sulfur fields over here, and we have a lonely mountain over here, and it's like all just like these really crazy elements all packed into one like really small area.
Small space, yeah. And I think it can work if you kind of drawn them in a spaced out way. Even if it's not necessarily realistic in terms of geographical things, at least aesthetically it's laid out in a pleasing way. I think you can get away with it, but I think maybe for every map, trying to cram as many things into it, I mean, that's saying that. This is a really busy map behind me, the one that the first Rev map that I did. But
Right.
as you say, like, experimentation with such things is an interesting thing to do.
Yeah. And
What's your favorite kind of landscape?
what's my favorite kind of landscape? Mountains.
Like the
Definitely.
one, the photo behind you, those kind of mountains with like the trees, the mist, bit edgy.
That basically, that was probably photographed in Oregon. I wouldn't be surprised. It's always mountainous with pine trees and foggy. So I definitely live in a beautiful area. And that kind of goes back to my original point that sometimes I feel like we take landscapes for granted because we live there. You
Yeah.
know, out my back door, there's beautiful mountains and stuff and trees, and it was beautiful and foggy this morning. And, you know, it's just part of the landscape to me, and I just take it for granted, and I don't step back and appreciate it. And that's true of everywhere that I've lived. There's something beautiful about that area. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite common as well if you live somewhere, even if you live in like the most kind of sought after tourist destination, quite often the people that live there all the time haven't done those things. That was definitely the case for me. Like in the city I lived in the UK, it was very popular for tourists, but they were like, "Oh, have you been to this place? Have you been to this?" I was like, "No,
yeah.
I'm not even sure where that place is." So yeah, it's very easy to take for granted, like what's right outside your front door. And there's lots of interesting things there. You just have to get your specs on.
Right.
I wear glasses actually most of the time, and this is definitely what they look like.
Exactly like that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm a trendsetter. What can I say? And that actually kind of like leads into another question that was asked, which was from worldbuilding.io. I think it was an IO anyway. And it was actually about world building for RPGs, but using agile techniques to do world building. And as far as I know, you're not like super involved in D&D stuff, but I thought it was an interesting perspective for map making, this kind of like do it on the cuff or preparation first.
Well, I'm not sure if you've followed that. Recently, I started doing these 1 hour map challenges, and it's just I kind of started because of my own perfectionism and realizing that it's really exhausting to always spend 40 to 50 hours on a map. And realizing that I could sit down for just an hour and create something from start to finish and be done with it and be able to set aside.
With you, foul map.
Accomplish something, right, for just an hour. So that's a challenge that I've taken myself, and I've challenged other people to do it too, because I think that it forces you to speed up and just stretch your creativity a little bit more. If you're trying to make a map off the cuff, the main thing you want to figure out is what's the main feature, what's the point of the map, and then try to not add in a lot of unnecessary clutter and things, kind of like what we were talking about before, just so you have their focal point of what the goal is in the map. So if you were doing an RPG map and you wanted the focus to be a tavern or an inn or something like that, you don't want to spend a lot of time planning like the surrounding farms and all that stuff. It's like keep the focus on what the focus is. So that would be my advice.
And do you kind of, with your larger maps, how much time do you spend in the preparation stage generally? Like, I mean, this can just be a rough estimate, a guesstimate, some might say.
It really depends. It depends on the map. It's usually somewhere between 2 hours to 3 or 4 hours, probably, kind of in that composition phase. I've learned to spend more time in that phase and not get too enthusiastic with diving in and starting to add line stuff, because too often I've ended up down that rabbit trail and then had to literally erase everything and start over. So
I feel very called out right now. I've never done that.
It's helpful. I understand it's exciting to dive into a new project, but the more
Yeah.
time in sketching and working on my composition and stuff, the less revisions I have to do later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes actually for the first few maps, I was kind of glad that I got overexcited and just started drawing because it kind of made me appreciate that step more rather
Hmm.
than just being like, woohoo, I'm going to draw some mountains and some
Right.
more mountains. Um,
Well, and I
and
realized I kind of contradicted myself too with like talking about the 1 hour map and working really fast and then saying, make sure that you spend a lot of time in sketching and stuff. And I see both of those things as different exercises. Really, I see
yeah,
the map as a study and an exercise to speed up my process later on when I am being a little bit more intentional with a project. But if it's like a 1 hour map, a lot of times I won't even do any type of a sketch. I'll literally, I think the last one I did, I was inspired by the idea of a bridge crossing a chasm. So that was the first thing I drew. And then I just started kind of expanding upon it and expanding upon it and just to see where it ended up. So,
yeah. Well, I think definitely because I did try one of your 1 hour maps and I found it. I was quite surprised at the outcome of it. I was kind of like, oh, I'll get loads done in an hour, and then actually I didn't get loads done in an hour. Um, and it made me think about, like, as you say, being more intentional about where you're putting your focus,
mhm.
especially in the first steps, and even just kind of like I've definitely learned the hard way of like making sure that you leave space for text and stuff like that if that's what you're choosing to do. And sometimes if you just rush headfirst into a map, then you leave out those things and then it does come back to bite you in the ass.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it can be fun in relaxing yourself to, I mean, perfectionism, I think, is just a general genetic trait for artists.
Mm.
That people, you want to put out your best work, and you want to create awesome things. So sometimes perfectionism can be a really big block. It can be quite daunting when you have this whole piece of paper and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
now it begins. So doing those like fun 1 hour maps is kind of like it's the end result isn't really the purpose of it.
Yeah. Exactly. It's more of the process that's really the point. And, the hard thing about art is it is extremely personal and it is in a lot of ways a reflection of yourself. So anytime somebody, well, on the positive side, anytime somebody praises your work, it feels really good because it feels like they're praising you as a person. But anytime there's flaws or somebody doesn't like it, it's really hard to not take it personally.
Yeah,
And I have to get to this point where I'm kind of emotionally detached from my work to actually make it better. Because
yeah.
if I care too much, I'll just keep redoing the same thing. And you know that most of the time I work digitally, so on my iPad you just double tap with 2 fingers and it'll
It's so
undo.
easy to delete stuff.
Too easy. And my wife picks on me enough that I'm sitting there and she's like, draw a line, undo, draw a line, undo. You don't want to do that.
That
But
sounds like a vicious cycle.
easy habit to get into. So
Yeah. And so perfectionism is a kind of like a problem in itself, but how do you think that like the influence of social media is like kind of exponentially grown this perfectionism sphere, and how
oh
has it affected you?
yeah. Well, again, if you're putting your work out there with any regularity, I think that it further cultivates that need for everything to be perfect. You have to have, you have to lay out the perfect feed on your Instagram. Everything has to be curated and fit together. And um, if a post doesn't perform as well as you hope or expect, you
Yeah.
know, it can ruin your day, which sounds silly, but when you
Well,
invest
no, when you put a lot of time into it or
if you
emotional energy.
and you feel like all signs should point to this post doing really well and then it doesn't, you have to remember that there's an algorithm and sometimes Instagram picks
A
up a post.
sneaky algorithm,
Sometimes
forever a mystery.
You know, I've had posts blow up that are totally random throwaway posts. If anything, it seems like the posts that do really well are the ones I don't spend a lot of time on, which is frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, that is frustrating. And have you really dealt with a lot of any negativity? And how have you dealt with it if you have had it?
I haven't honestly dealt with much negativity in the mapping community. I've dealt with it outside of that, like when I did some photography work and um, stuff like that. So it's like I kind of have a past of dealing with the negativity, and it's not fun to work through. But for the most part, everybody in the mapping community is fairly supportive, and I haven't really
Yeah,
had anybody too nasty at all. So
well, that's good because otherwise I'm going to beat them up. You've heard it here first, folks. If you're mean to Josh, I will beat you up. Only in a friendly way, obviously. I'm not inciting violence on the platform.
at the most, I think that you have to realize too that a lot of people will throw out a comment, like a negative comment about your work, and you have to, more often than not, you have to realize that it's a difference of taste rather than
Yeah,
something actually wrong. Sometimes it's something is wrong, and people usually offer advice to help you fix it, but
yeah.
most of the time it's stylistic differences where it's like,
I
oh,
think there's a fine
like
balance as well between,
I want it done your way, so
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's like a fine line between just the negative comment and phrasing it in a way that it can actually help somebody. And it's then like how you choose to interpret that, which is it's difficult as an artist because you want everybody to like what you've done because
right,
you spent time on it, but realize that again, yeah, stylistic differences and the way that people go about things is completely different. And
right,
especially now that we have this kind of like traditional mapping and therefore digital mapping, that there are some things with digital mapping that you can't necessarily achieve with traditional mapping, and like with the influx of things like Wonderdraft and Incarnate and stuff like that,
mm-hmm.
all kinds of maps are being made now, which is really great. Love maps. Don't know if you'd noticed.
Right.
But it does, create like these kind of spheres where people maybe are overlapping and have different opinions about how things need to be done.
Yeah, and with the mapping community, I always say that there's primarily two different groups of people. There's the people that are primarily artists and see it as an art, and there's people that are primarily scientific in the way that they think. And I guess if anything, that's where I've gotten the most negativity is if somebody bends heavy towards the scientific side of it,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, did you consider the plate tectonics and stuff like that? And
Did
I'm
you
like,
split a river, Josh?
I
Did
have
you?
not split a river. I have not.
How
That's
angelic of you.
that's a mapping sin I have been aware of for a long time. So, but
Yeah, well, I guess I'm just a sinner. I'm just like, woo!
not not splitting rivers is one of those things that I feel like I probably tell somebody at least once a week. It's so common, so don't feel bad. My early maps that I never showed anyone did that.
Yeah.
Just that I lurked on Cartographers Guild and learned that there's something called the River Police and that you shouldn't be splitting rivers. Um, but it's like, even with that rule, there's exceptions. You could say rivers never split. Well, it's like, except when they
They
do.
do.
Um,
Yeah, there's always an exception.
Uncommon, but I always say that you need to learn what the rules are before you can break them.
Yeah.
Because you can break them in an informed way. So if you want to split a river, know why you're doing it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair comment. I have another question here from Wayward Wizard. Is it better to perfect and stick at one style or branch out and try numerous ones?
I definitely think you should try numerous ones. The
Yeah,
advice I give people is if they're new to cartography or drawing in general, find 3 cartographers who have a style, hopefully that's a little bit different from each other, that you really like, and imitate them, you know, sketch their work, trace their work, figure out how they draw things. And by the end of it, once you've figured out those 3 different styles, you'll be producing something that's unique to you. I'm perpetually trying new styles and trying new things and stuff. And if anything, I'm a little too schizophrenic, jumping around with different styles and stuff. And I don't like sticking with a style too long.
Yeah.
I kind of come back to it because I know that people like a particular look, but I'm always messing around with different styles and stuff, because I think that the knowledge that you take in and all the different skills is how you eventually do find your own personal style. It's not this magical, I've found my style thing. It's, well, I learned a little bit from this person, a little bit from this person, I'll take some information over here, and then you end up producing something that's unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially at the beginning, like not being afraid to try out different stuff. And it's not, you don't have to share everything that you do. So there's no kind of shame if you draw something and you don't like it. There's no, there's nobody saying you have to show everything that you do. I absolutely do not show everything that I draw. So not being afraid to try stuff out, because as you say, that's how you're going to find, if you try different flavors of ice cream, that's how you're going to find out that all ice cream is great.
Probably, yeah, that's a pretty true statement.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I've had a few people even message me and like apologize for tracing my work, and using it as inspiration. And it's like, it's flattering, honestly. It's like, if you're trying to imitate me and get jobs as me,
yeah, that's not cool.
Cool. But if you're just imitating me to learn because you really like the style, then it's flattering more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And like your little tutorials are really helpful. The step-by-step process, I think, is just really, it's good for people like me that are very like, I like just step-by-step things, rather than, sometimes I see people, they're like, here's how to draw something, and they're like, blah, 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 done. Like, I literally blinked and I don't know what happened. Please help.
Yeah.
Send Josh.
On YouTube and looking up how to draw something, and it's literally just a time lapse. And it's like, well, that's not how to draw something. That's you just going off that you know how to do it. So
yeah,
I
no, absolutely.
Stuff too. So that's how I learn.
And so I've got a few questions about kind of like how you go about, because I think you're quite unique in the fact that there's kind of like this group of cartographers who focus on fantasy novels and stuff like that, and then there's other people that focus primarily on RPG maps and D&D and that sort of stuff. You kind of exist in this special Josh space, which is just like being a cool dude helping people out. I wouldn't say, I mean, you have done a few fantasy novel maps and stuff like that, but your maps seem to be like for the joy of maps rather than just for a specific purpose, which I think is something that makes your account really special, and something that definitely drew me to your account when I first started mapping. How did you kind of like come to this conclusion that you were Josh the map teacher? And how have you like kind of grown that style? And yeah,
I feel like it's partly just part of my personality. As soon as I figure out how to do something, the first thing I want to do is show somebody else. So if I learned how to draw a canyon, the first thing I want to do is create a tutorial to show and teach other people how to do it in a hopefully more streamlined way than I learned. I find that it's kind of born out of almost a frustration because I don't see tutorials on certain things, or they're just not done well. So it's like I kind of have to, trek through and figure out how to do something. And hopefully I can, by creating one of my own tutorials, speed up the process for somebody else so they don't have to work quite so hard to figure out how to draw a particular element. So like I said, I feel like it's just kind of part of my personality. I just want to show people how to do things. So
well, I'm glad that you have that personality, because it's definitely helped me out. You've saved me a lot of time, Josh.
Good.
But I think you're right. Like, a lot of the tutorials that I've seen, particularly on YouTube, they kind of like, they focus more on like a holistic thing rather than specific features, which like your feature tutorials, I think I found the most helpful because, as I say, they're not really that common. I like breaking it down, just how to do a waterfall, for example.
Right.
I can't even remember really seeing any like that. So yeah, it was quite frustrating before I found your account. I was like, I was looking for you, and then there you were, just with your waterfalls and your volcanoes. I was like, yes. And so your feed is very well curated. Like, it's very well presented. Can you just tell me, how do you do that?
Magic.
I was about to say, are you a wizard? It's
am.
okay. It's a safe space for wizards here.
Yeah, no. That's probably my obsessive personality, that it's like I always have to do things 100%. So if anything, I'm more aware of my shortcomings, I feel like, than other people. Usually if somebody points something out, I'm like, I'm already aware of that.
Don't worry, I've already put it on the list.
Oh, no problem. But I have a background in graphic design, and I do video and photography and things like that. So I'm really fascinated by good branding and business and things like that. So it's kind of something that I almost enjoy as much as the mapping, is curating a attractive feed that is well branded and appeals to a certain type of person. So
Yeah. What kind of tips would you give to people who are trying to create like a brand for themselves? Like, how would you suggest that people go about it? And maybe some like practical tips, kind of like how you use presets, or I don't know what you do.
Right. So the first thing that you want to do when you're building a brand is identify your ideal customer. And even if, you know, you're still just kind of doing it for fun, you still need to identify who that ideal person is that's going to be viewing your account. You, of course, recognize that other people will be viewing it as well, but you want to speak as directly as you can to a particular type of individual. So if you want to do maps for RPGers and stuff like that, then you have to have that person in mind for everything that you do and every post that you make and the way that you style things. And it's like, even men and women, it's like, do you want to appeal more to men or do you want to appeal more to women? So generally when it comes to branding, you're supposed to create a customer persona, and you literally name them, you give them an actual name, an age.
What's your character's name? I'm curious.
I have two of them, and it's Ryan and Colette. So
Colette. That's an unusual name. I haven't met many people called Colette. Maybe that's like more of an American name.
I think I've only met one Colette myself, and it was back in kindergarten. So
well, clearly she had quite an impression.
Well, I don't know. The name stood out, but so yeah, it's like you have to identify who that person is and stuff. And for me, the Ryan persona is other map makers who are aspiring to draw maps, maybe make some money on the side, launch their art career. That's who Ryan is. So that's the focus of my material by putting out tutorials and brush packs and stuff, is I want to help Ryan. And with Colette,
I want to help Ryan. Ryan needs help.
And with Colette, it's the other side of my business where it is a little bit more targeted towards fantasy novels. So she's the younger, aspiring fantasy author who needs a map. She doesn't know how to draw maps. She doesn't have any artistic talent herself, but she needs somebody that's actually going to help her draw a map. So that's the other, side of my audience, is the person that's an aspiring artist, and then the person who's the aspiring writer. So yeah, that's where you want to begin, is figure out who you want to appeal to. If you want to appeal to writers, then you go where the writers hang out. If you want to appeal to people that play RPG, then you go follow people that are watching Critical Role and all this stuff. But
yeah.
Practical. And then after that, once you figured out who your ideal customer is, you want to figure out what your branding is going to be. So you pick 1 to 2 fonts that you use all the time for any branded posts. So it's always the same fonts. You try to pick, I think I have 5 branded colors that I try to rotate through, kind of a teal, a darker teal, an orange, and kind of more like a paper tone, since so much of my work has that aged paper look. So you kind of want to build your brand like that, and then that's how you curate your feed and stuff, is with consistent colors, consistent fonts. And then when
do you use any kind of like scheduler for your posts, or do you just
I don't speak Instagram. Instagram is inconsistent on if you can use a scheduler or not. Some of them, like Hootsuite and stuff, I tried early on, but I noticed that my posts never performed as well if it was a scheduled post. So
interesting.
For sure, but it seemed like Instagram was knocking me for scheduling a post. So I don't.
That's interesting.
I everything manually. I kind of will sometimes plan out posts. That's not something I'm great at, but I try to plan out some posts and stuff, and then I post them when I can. During the,
do you kind of like pre-plan the captions? Because something for me, like writing captions it feels like it takes almost as long as drawing the map. And
I totally agree. And one of the things is I don't want people to just like my images that I share. I want to interact with them. I want to talk to them. I want to get to know them, answer questions and stuff. So I really spend almost as much time trying to think of captions and questions and ways to interact with people or provide value to people. It's time consuming. I can't put like smiley face and call it a day. I just can't do it.
I think you should just do it like just one time.
Just one time.
We'll all know, all the people that have watched the live will know, and we'll all like it just because you like put a smiley face.
It might actually help me.
It's a conspiracy, the smiley face conspiracy.
Right. Oh, and I'm gonna say practical. You asked about presets and stuff. I actually don't use any presets that are built into Instagram or anything like that. Not that that's wrong. I mean, they're a good starting place and stuff. Like I said, though, I have a background in photography, so I shoot everything on my phone. I have an iPhone 11, so it takes really good quality images, and then I edit it in the Lightroom app, because then I photograph it in the Lightroom app because it's a raw image, which gives you more leeway to adjust things, and then I edit, color grade it all in the Lightroom app. And I have some presets that I've built myself that color grade them, but I still always have to make some minor adjustments and such.
That's so much dedication, Josh. I'm so impressed.
Session, I'm not sure.
Sometimes I turn up the contrast on my pictures and I'm like, wow, I edited a photo. And now I'm just like, I'm nowhere near Josh's level. Maybe one day I'll be able to do a preset. I don't know. I feel like to do so.
Passion as well for you. It's like a lot of the people that I follow on like YouTube that I watch are videographers. So I'm kind of engrossed in that world and into the color grading and filming.
It's a beautiful world, an aesthetically beautiful world.
It is. It is.
And kind of, so you do most of your work digitally. Mm-hmm. Do you prefer doing it digitally because it's faster and you can edit it more easily and like it's more practical, or do you actually prefer traditional map? It's just that it is more convenient to do it digitally. Did you start digitally and kind of continue from there, or did you do it traditionally for a short period of time? Like, how did you bridge the gap between the two?
So I did start traditionally. I started with the good old ballpoint pen, doodling on the back of receipts as I was between customers, waiting for somebody else to come up. I would be at the cash register, doodling maps with the ballpoint. And
doodling at work, Josh?
What was that? Well, I was
Doodling
starting.
at work.
But yeah, so it's like I started that way, and then I got some micron pins and things like that. And a few of the artists that I was into at the time, so like Raymond Swanland, I really admired his work, and I realized that he was painting digitally. So I ended up doing some research, and I got a Wacom, just a cheap bamboo Wacom,
Yeah.
and I started with that, and I don't remember what program I was using. I feel like it might have been Painter.
Yeah.
I started using that, and it's a big adjustment to get used to looking at the screen but drawing down
Yeah.
here. And it is an adjustment, but I try to encourage people to just do one commission that way, and by the end of it, you'll forget about it. If you just do it for hours on end, you'll get used to it.
Yeah.
So I did that for quite a while, and then I ended up getting a Samsung tablet for Christmas several years ago, and I started with that, and then it started to die, and then I got an iPad because everybody was talking about the Procreate app, and it seemed like all the professionals were using Procreate, and it's like I basically got the iPad because I wanted the Procreate app.
Yeah. Is it the iPad Pro that you got?
Initially, it wasn't. Because I was wary of getting an Apple product. I'd never really delved into using Apple products, so I just got a inexpensive iPad 9.7. So it was kind of like the cheapest one that you could get that worked with an Apple Pencil.
The pencil. Yeah.
So I used that for a year, and I was surprised at actually how quickly and how natural it felt to use. I did a full-on commission for a novel. I started it 5 days after getting the iPad. So it was actually a pretty quick adjustment to it. But I used that for a year, and then I did end up upgrading to the iPad Pro 11, which is what I use now. And there's some minor benefits with.
I was about to say, did you feel the difference? Because they kind of market the Pro as being like this completely like stellar experience compared to all the other products.
It'll change everything. I wouldn't necessarily say that. The primary things that I noticed, the first reason I got it is because in Procreate you can have larger canvas sizes because the iPad Pro can handle it. So that was the primary reason that I got it, was I wanted to have bigger maps. But then beyond that, I noticed that they always say that the glass is slightly thicker on the 9.7 than it is on the iPad Pro. So if you're not used to it, it feels like there's glass in between. But because I started with the 9.7, I honestly didn't notice it until I switched to the iPad Pro. And I started making lines, and my lines were always slightly higher than they should be, because I realized on the iPad Pro that it was actually connecting pixel, and I had been compensating the whole time and not realizing it for the thicker glass, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
The other benefit is
a screen protector for the iPad Pro.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Do you use a screen protector for the iPad Pro?
I did for a little bit, and I took it off. So I got one of the those matte finish.
The paper-like ones.
Yeah, the paper. That's right, the paper-like ones, and I put it on there, and I didn't care for it, especially if I was using it as just an iPad and having to it felt really weird to scroll.
Yeah.
It, and there was toothy texture. It kind of was nails on a chalkboard to me. It was really irritating. And I'm already used to drawing on glass, so I'm used to that smooth surface. So if anything, it felt like I was having to drag the pencil across the iPad to get it to go. So I ended up taking it off.
That's interesting, because a lot of people said that it's the other way. They just this feels like they're just slipping around all over the place. But I suppose if you started off really early and you kind of didn't really have the option to have the screen protector, so you kind of got used to it.
Right, and I think that's purely what it is. It's if you're used to paper, I totally understand why it would be really weird to draw on this super slick surface. But if you adjust to it, then switching back to the paper feels really weird as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we all
absolutely.
have, I know some people really love those screen protectors, but I like, and then it got irritating.
Yeah. Well, I bought an iPad quite some time ago with the idea that I was going to start doing more digital stuff.
Hmm.
And partly I haven't done it because I haven't really had time. I barely even have time to take out the pen and paper at the moment. But I think I did try a little bit with just the glass, and I was like, whoa. But then like I haven't put the time in to like overcome that. And I'm sure it would be possible to overcome it. You yourself have done so. And I'm sure lots of other people. But I am curious to try the screen protector to see if it made me like instantly click with the iPad a bit more.
Like I said, it seems like if people are really used to paper, it does help.
Yeah.
The other thing too, if you're using Procreate, go into the brush settings and you can turn the streamline up, and that will give you smoother lines. Because sometimes people that aren't used to digital, they're maybe pressing a little too hard on the screen and their pen is shifting around, and you can't figure out why all your line work is really jagged looking and you can't get smooth lines. If you turn that line up, it does make a pretty big difference. And then as you adjust to it, I've noticed that I had it when I first started, it was kind of like at 80%, which is pretty high. But now I can draw closer to like, I don't know, 40% or something. So you can actually end up turning it down to get, once you start getting used to using it.
Yeah. Did you use any like specific tutorials or something to learn how to use Procreate? Or did you just kind of like learn as you went?
I don't remember if there was a specific tutorial or series that I watched. Like I said, I just kind of watched a few tutorials and then dove right into doing some mapping projects. So the learning curve really wasn't that steep because I feel like Procreate is pretty straightforward compared to like some other programs. Like Photoshop is much to learn.
Photoshop is scary.
Yeah. Well, and you can almost do too many things in Photoshop. Procreate is for drawing and painting, and so it's a lot more streamlined. I think the main thing is learning some of the gestures and stuff. So you can do the tap of the 2 fingers to undo. You can do 3 fingers and swipe to completely clear the layer that you're working on, and just little things like that. Those are helpful to learn, but beyond that, the app itself is pretty straightforward, with just the brush panel and layers and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. I'm definitely going to invest more time in it.
You got it. Oh, you asked me why I prefer to use digital. It's because it's so versatile. I always felt like if I wanted to draw anything, I had to bust out the paper and the pens and the pencils, and
there was a lot of paraphernalia involved in doing traditional mapping.
Kind of setup to just even begin, and then you have to do it at like a table or
you need a space for it,
drawing surface and stuff. And I have 3 kids under 5, and I just know that they would be coming and grabbing the pencil, and so.
Do they ever get involved in the mapping? Have any of them shown an interest in drawing their own maps?
They do a little bit. My older daughter,
that's so cute.
was sitting by me just the other day, and I was doing the shading on that map that I recently shared with the volcano, and I was just blocking in some base shadows and stuff, and I ended up showing her how, okay, the shadows are on this side of the mountain because the light is coming from here, so we need to put the highlights over here. And she actually ended up I created a new layer for her, and she ended up, she actually
a baby artist.
Mountain, and she did really well. So.
Oh, that's adorable. That's such a heartwarming story. I feel like warm and fuzzy after that.
She's interesting. She's got a kind of a interesting way that she thinks of things, because she actually drew a map all by herself at one point, like a floor plan, and then she went to her Duplos and she started building the floor plan. And I'm like, what 4-year-old is that? They like built. She's
a super cool one.
Architect. I don't know.
Super great things.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that's really cute. Well, we're getting close to the end, but I did have like just one question, like about where you're kind of going with your maps. Do you have like a grand end goal? Is there any projects that you would really love to do in the future, like bigger projects or something specific that you'd like to achieve with your maps? I mean, other than like the tutorials, which are, you know, obvious purposes to like help somebody draw X, Y, Z.
Right.
But for you personally?
Yeah, I feel like kind of going back to my two character personas that I mentioned before, I kind of have two sides of it. On one hand,
Oh,
I really want.
sorry, that's my
Okay.
cat. He was like, excuse me, you're not paying attention to me. Rude.
So
Sorry,
on
continue.
one hand, I build up the Map Effects website, and that's actually part of the reason why I ended up changing the name on my Instagram account and my website. It used to be joshstolars.com, used to be my
Yeah,
Instagram handle. Is I wanted it to become less about me and more about map effects and helping other people, and it becoming a resource that people that want to take up map making or just drawing in general can go to. So I think my biggest focus is I want to get more tutorials. I want to focus on writing some more blog posts that dive a little bit more into the actual world building and some of the things that are part of mapping but not necessarily drawing related. And then I want to get out some more brush packs and other types of digital resources to help expedite the process for some people, because it's like some people, they just want to draw maps and they don't want to
yeah.
mess with making brushes and stuff. And I kind of geek out about the brushes. For whatever reason, I really enjoy going into all the settings and okay, make a little
I'm
adjustment
fiddling.
here, and it's like I'll literally spend hours making brushes. And I like being able to make those available to people who absolutely
Don't
hate
have
the
the time.
brushes. They would rather just be
Yeah.
drawing maps, and that's fine. You know, if you looked at painters of old and stuff, you had people that just were master painters, but you had people that were masters at making paintbrushes. So there's two different types
Yeah,
of people.
that's true. I hadn't
They're like,
ever thought of that. That's kind of like a cool thought.
yeah, I mean, I can't think of any specific examples, but who are the people that made these paintbrushes that actually painted, you know, these master works? And I know some of these
Yeah.
paint brushes, but so yeah, I feel like building up the Map Effects platform and making that a more valuable resource for people is definitely a focus of mine. And then on the flip side of it, with actually my own personal work, I would love to start doing some more fantasy maps for a little bit bigger named authors. I mean, of course, who wouldn't want to do a fantasy map for Brandon Sanderson or John Gwynn or something like
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
That's of course like my own like personal aspirations is to
Hey, if
start.
you're watching, Brandon, hit Josh
Well,
up.
Brandon probably watching, but no. But yeah, so it's like I would definitely love to do stuff like that too. So
Wow, I think you absolutely will do those things, to be honest. Like, there are many, many cartographers out there, but I feel like you, among a very small group of people, are like, you're going places. So I'm excited to see what other stuff you put out there. And I will put a link in the description thing of your website so that people can go and find you and enjoy your tutorials and future blog posts.
cool. Well, thank you.
Well, absolutely. And I'm going to wrap it up here, but thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about maps, because we all love maps, right?
Who doesn't want an excuse to talk about maps? You know, even people that
Exactly.
are actually interested in maps always kind of find the fact that you draw maps intriguing. There's something just
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
people.
no, it's quite a niche activity, I would say. I don't know anybody in my real life that does it or even knows what it is. When I say fantasy cartography, it's kind of like, you what now?
Right. That you can actually make some money doing that. Yeah, they
Yeah,
don't. They usually don't believe it's a thing.
yeah, no, that's very true. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and yeah,
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.
have a good rest of the day. You're midday there, right?
Yeah, it's lunch. I need to go eat something. So.
Yeah, don't we just start off in the name of maps?
And you have a good night.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to sleep very well this evening. Okay, see you later.
See ya.
Bye.